This is the story of how Coalition Raven captured the first light. A very, very long time ago, before human beings were created, there was a world that was very different. This world was made up of all the animals and birds that live in the world that we live in today, but they were in a different form. So this is a very, very old story from a world long time ago. And in this world, there was a character named Coalition. Coalition means raven in Nuuchahnulth. This story takes place at a time when there was no light in the sky, and Coalition and all of the other life forms lived in darkness. Coalition would stare across the sea day after day, and one day Coalition saw a little glimmer of light shine for a brief moment and then disappear. Coalition got tell all of the other people what he had seen. Pretty soon the excitement grew, and Coalition would watch longer and longer across the sea. Far away he would see, every once in a while, a little glimmer of light shine and then disappear. Every time that Coalition saw it, he would get more excited and he would start to come up with a plan. He wanted all of the people to be able to share the light. He knew that it would change the way that they live, that they would be able to see, that they would be able to cook their food, and that life would be much more comfortable for everybody. So, Coalition gathered all of the people who lived in darkness, and he told them of the light that he saw far away across the sea. He came up with a plan, and in this time, all of the life forms could transform into different shapes. So, Coalition gathered all of the people, bear, and eagle, and deer, all of the different life forms that lived in this ancient world, and he told them that we must transform ourselves into sockeye salmon, we call mi'at. Mi'at would swim across the water, across the sea, and then get to where the people with the light lived. And once they got there, the people of light would put them into their chuppets, into their canoes, and bring them home into their houses. And when they were brought into the house, they would see where the light was, and they would transform back into their regular form and take the light and share it with everybody. This was Coalition's plan. And so he gathered all of the people together, and they all agreed that it would be much better if there was light that would be in the sky so that they could see and cook their food. So they agreed to the plan, and they all transformed into mi'at, to sockeye salmon. They started to swim across the sea, and as they got closer to where the people of light live, they could see that those people were excited too. They quickly gathered their canoes, their chuppets, and went out to harvest all of the mi'at that was coming their way. As they got closer to where the fish were swimming, the people of light saw something that was strange and peculiar. One of the mi'at was way, way bigger than all of the others. It was huge, and almost as big as a whale. And so the people of light looked and they thought, that's strange. Maybe this is a trick. We should be careful. So they decided not to harvest and catch the mi'at, and instead turned around and went back to their houses with empty chuppets, with empty canoes. Well, the people of darkness turned around and swam back home and transformed into their regular form. They felt disappointed. Well, that plan didn't work. Some people were a little bit mad at Coalition because he had kind of ruined the plan by being way bigger than all of the other fish. Well, time went on. Coalition kept staring across the sea, and every once in a while he would see that glimmer of light, and he kept holding on to the thought of capturing that light for everyone. So Coalition came up with another plan, and then the second plan was a little bit same to the first one, but slightly different. And this time of year, salmon berries were growing on the bushes, and Coalition knew that the people of light must harvest berries too, and enjoy those sweet berries that grow on the bushes. So he gathered the people of darkness together, and he told them of his new plan. This time we transform into kawi, salmon berries. And when the people of light come to gather us in their baskets, then they'll bring us into their house, we'll transform into our regular form, take the light, and share it with everybody. Okay, the people of darkness thought, okay, this plan could work as long as Coalition didn't, fool around and mess it up. So they decided that they would do it, and they transformed into berry bushes. Sure enough, the people of light came with their berry picking baskets, and they were singing their berry. They were excited. The berries were everywhere. So they were about to start harvesting the berries and fill their baskets, but they noticed something strange and peculiar. Something was a little bit different than all of the other bushes. Most of the berries were regular size, but some of the berries were huge, bigger than a giant ball. And so the people of light looked and they thought, that bush seems very strange. The berries are way, way, way too big. They're even bigger than my head. And the berries are supposed to be very small. So they thought this might be a trick. And by now the people of light knew that Coalition the Raven was a bit of a trickster, and that he was scheming and coming up with plans on how to take the light. So they were very protective. And they thought, no, this must be Coalition up to his tricks. So the people of light turned around with empty baskets and went back to their houses. The people of darkness turned to the regular form and went back home with no light. They were getting very upset now, and they thought, well, we are foolish for following Coalition. A lot of people stopped believing in Coalition, and they decided that they were just going to live the way that they were going to live. But Coalition wouldn't give up. He would see that glimmer of light every once in a while, and it would make him more and more determined and excited that he needed to get it to share with everyone. So, as Coalition was watching, one day he thought to himself, I need somebody who's very, very, very smart to come up with a plan. That's what the problem was before. So he thought, and who was the most wisest person he could think of? Well, everybody knew that Chickna, the little brown wren, the bird, that he was the wisest one of everybody. He always thought out what he was going to say, and he was always very thoughtful. So, Coalition went to Chickna and he asked, can you come up with a plan on how we can take the light and share it with everyone? Chickna thought about it for a second and thought, well, that is a very good idea. If we can share the light with everyone, it would be a huge, huge advantage for everybody. So Chickna agreed. And Coalition excitedly asked, well, what is the plan? What is the plan? Chickna said, you have to be patient. I'll think about an idea, and when I'm ready, I'll tell you what it is. So Coalition walked away, excited, thinking, finally, we're going to come up with a plan that's going to work. Many days went by, and Chickna still hadn't come to Coalition to tell him what the plan was. And Coalition was getting impatient. He was hopping all around. I wonder what Chickna is thinking. What is the plan? So, finally, Coalition went to Chickna and he asked, are you ready? Do you have a plan? And Chickna did. So, Coalition said, I'll go gather everybody and bring them and tell them what the plan is. And Chickna said, just wait. This plan is just for you, Coalition. Because where you went wrong in the first two plans was you always stuck out and had to be different than everybody else. So this plan is going to use you to be able to provide something for everybody. Coalition thought about it. Thought, He still couldn't quite understand. So Chickna explained to him what the plan would be. Again, Coalition was going to have to transform, but this time into something very, very small, not very big, and not with anybody else at all. It was only going to be Coalition. And what Chickna told Coalition to transform into was a little tiny needle from the branch of a tree. and that little needle would drift in the wind and settle in the water where the people of light live. And once there, Colossian in that form of a little needle would wait, and he would have to wait until the chief's daughter came to get water for drinking. So Colossian listened to the plan and he said, okay, I can do that. And then Chikna gave him more instructions, and as the planning went on, Colossian started to prepare himself. He transformed into a little tiny needle, and sure enough, the wind picked up and carried him across the sea to where the people of light live. And there he landed in the drinking pool, waiting patiently for the chief's daughter. One day she finally arrived, and he made his way to her drinking cup as she dipped it into the water. She looked at her cup and she thought, oh, well, it's just a little needle. It can't cause any harm. She drank the cup of water, and there was Colossian as a little needle, and he got swallowed by the chief's daughter. Well, time went on, and pretty soon the chief's daughter was pregnant, and she was going to have a baby, and everybody was excited. Well, some of the people in the village thought, this is strange. Maybe it's a trick. Maybe it's Colossian the raven doing a trick. And then other people said, well, this is our chief and his daughter. This might be our future chief. So people didn't know. Eventually, a little baby boy was born, and he was just like all other beautiful little babies, and everybody was excited. This little boy had light skin, and he also learned to crawl and walk and talk very quickly. The mother and grandmother and grandfather loved him very much. Colossian was now born as a baby boy and lived amongst the people of light. This was all part of Chikna's plan. So, there were some things that were a little bit different about Colossian. He crawled and walked and talked very quickly, and he was also a crybaby and would cry for many, many things, almost all the time. He knew that his grandfather, the chief, had many, many different things, like weapons and tools and other things that were fascinating to him. And he would cry and cry and cry to be able to play with the different things that were put away in the back of the house. The first thing that little Colossian would cry for was to be able to play in the chuppets, in the canoe. His grandfather said, no, it seems dangerous. But the baby would cry and cry and cry, and he cried to his mother, and he said, I promise I'll be very careful if you just let me play in the canoe and the chuppets. And his mother talked to her father, the chief, and they finally agreed, okay, we will put a chuppets out on the water and tie it to a tree so that he can't drift away and that it'll be safe. So the next day, the people watched, and this little boy went down on the beach in the canoe that was tied to the tree, and he stopped crying for a little while, until a couple more days later he started to cry again. And this time he cried and cried and cried to be able to play with a magical paddle that his grandfather owned. This paddle was so powerful that with one stroke in the water, you could go a very, very far, far distance. So he would cry and cry and cry to play with that paddle in the canoe that was tied to the tree. His grandfather was not going to let him play with a paddle of that power and that strength. So the baby cried to his grandmother, Naniaksu, please let me play with the paddle. I promise I'll be very careful. What harm can it cause anyway? I have the canoe tied to the tree. So the grandmother agreed. And she talked to her husband, and she said, he needs to understand the power and the strength of these gifts that are in our possession anyway, because one day he will be the chief of the people of light as well. So he needs to be able to understand how important and significant these things are. So the grandfather listened, and he agreed. And what harm could it cause anyway? The canoe was tied to a tree, and it couldn't go anywhere. Sure enough, the next day, as the paddle was brought down to the canoe that was tied to the tree, the little boy, Coalition, played in the canoe quietly without crying. He played with the paddle, and he played in the canoe tied to the tree. And the people of light stopped believing or thinking that this might be Coalition up to a trick. Well, the next thing that this little boy cried for was a box. And this box was very, very protected and well guarded by warriors. Soon, little baby Coalition started to cry to play with the box that contained the light. There was no way that his grandfather would let him play with this box. It was way too powerful and important. Nonetheless, Coalition cried day after day. He cried to his mother, but there was nothing that she could do. He cried to the grandfather, and he would absolutely refuse. He cried to his grandmother, and his grandmother understood. Just like with the paddle, it was important for Coalition to be able to learn about the importance of these objects so that he could understand for himself how important they are. So she talked to her husband, and he reluctantly agreed. The next day, he had his warriors bring the box down to the canoe. Well, the people of light gathered, and again, many of them thought, this is crazy. This has to be Coalition up to his tricks, and he's going to steal the box of light right before our eyes. Well, nonetheless, they watched, and as the warriors put the box of light in the canoe that was tied to the tree with the powerful paddle, Coalition got into the canoe and started to play, and he stopped crying. In fact, day after day, as he played in the canoe with the paddle and the box, he stopped crying completely and didn't cry for anything else. Many days went by, and the people of light soon forgot how scared they were that this might be Coalition up to a trick. They just got used to seeing a little boy playing in a canoe that was tied to a tree. Well, this was exactly what Chikna, that Wren, had come up with as a plan. And he was waiting for this moment on the other side of the sea where the people of darkness lived. So, as this part came to, the next part involved Eatsquin, the mice, and they were instructed to swim across the sea late at night and to be able to sneak in and chew holes in all of the canoes that were on the beach where the people of light live. They were instructed to chew holes in the bottom of all of the canoes except for one, and that one canoe was the little canoe that was tied to a tree. So the mice did exactly what they were instructed to do. They swam across the sea, and they got to the people of light's beach, chewed little holes through the canoes, and then swam all the way back. The next morning, Coalition woke up to go play in his canoe that was tied to the tree, and he could see that there were little holes in all of the other canoes. He knew that this was part of Chikna's plan too. So this time when he got into the canoe with the box of light and the powerful paddle, he cut the rope and he paddled off really quickly, very, very, very fast. Well, the chief's warriors jumped up and they started to chase after him, but because the mice had chewed holes in the bottom of their canoes, they sunk one by one, and they could only watch as Coalition paddled further and further away. When Coalition arrived back to the place of darkness where he lived with the other people, he opened up the box, and when he did so, he got charred black in the process, like how the ravens look today, with their dark black feathers. And he opened up the box and shared the light with everyone. And from that day forward, that was how light came to our people. This story took place a long, long, long time ago. But even today, we see that other animals and birds still respect the fact that Raven, Coalition, captured the first light and shared it with everybody to make their life better. So today, what we recognize and what we see is that Coalition's reward for doing that favor for everybody was that when the tide is down low, Raven has the first choice of what they would like to eat. And then all of the other life forms take whatever they want after. So in the animal kingdom, they still observe and recognize Coalition for the brave feat that he provided to all of the people. The end.